Chapter 8 Ketty in the North 7 years have passed since Bob and Ketty married. They never enjoyed great prosperity in Limache, so Bob, who was always adventurous and impulsive, sought new challenges in the north, taking advantage of the saltpeter boom. His family accompanied him, and there they rented a house in Antofagasta, on a hill, overlooking the sea. Upon arrival, Ketty was captivated by the place, as it seemed familiar to her. Although the house was not in very good condition, she enthusiastically told her husband, "Here it is, Bob. Let's start improving it from tomorrow." Delighted with his wife's determination, Bob bought the necessary materials to begin the restoration. Everyone was motivated to get up early for this mission, and the children learned the skills of their mother, who proved to be very resourceful and creative. Before long, the house looked as good as new. The master bedroom, which was on the second floor, had a large window overlooking the sea. She had sewn white silk curtains that in the evenings, when the sea breeze reached them, fluttered outwards like sails in the wind. "These are the sailboats that will someday take us back to California," she told his children. Tom grew up with his siblings like this, listening to stories read to them by Ketty in their native language. The children would flip through storybooks sent to them by their grandmother Jane and Aunt Catherine. Twice a year, they received trunks full of clothes, crayons, toys, treats, and money that they sent to help with the children's needs. Ketty saved every penny for her children's education, since she couldn't always count on Bob. Every 4th of July, she would tell them about her homeland, which was a great nation that welcomed with hospitality and hard work thousands of immigrants from Europe and Asia in search of the American dream. Meanwhile, the arid life and hard work in the north caused Bob's spirit to break down. His former life of a spoiled child and joyful parties contrasted with the responsibilities of a steady job that allowed him to support his family. All of this contributed to the change in his personality, turning him into an irresponsible man on the go, who would lose himself for months at a time, seeking adventure and enjoying his false freedom. Ketty, in her solitude, resumed her correspondence with her cousin Manuel. In one of those letters, she tells him that she found out, through the social pages of El Mercurio, about the marriage of her friend Alicia to the son of a wealthy businessman from the Central Zone. Alicia had fulfilled her dream of studying law at the University of Chile, and after graduating as a lawyer, she devoted herself to teaching at the same institution, emphasizing the value of education for women as a factor of social change. By the time the children were of school age, Ketty had saved enough money to send them to the Jesuit school in Antofagasta. Tom pursued his studies with enthusiasm, and because he spent most of the time of the year at boarding school, he developed a taste for reading, learning about the world through books. The priest nurtured him with an excellent education, which, along with his great curiosity, made him a lively, self-taught man in all his disciplines. His favorite mentor was Don Pedro Hausenberg, a character of Prussian origin who marked him for life. With his height of 1.90 meters, dressed in a cassock and tiny glasses suspending on the tip of his nose, walked through the corridors with his hands crossed behind his back, without losing the sight of every detail of what his students were doing. He was the one who taught them history and religion. Through the master's parables, he taught them to develop their sensitivity and empathy for those in need. Ketty continued to receive news from her friends through Manuel letters. She learned that Alicia's marriage had not prospered because apparently this relationship lacked true love and had only been the product of a negotiation to increase the fortunes of the family. The separation was a scandal, but at the same time a stimulus for her, which turned her into a great activist for women's rights. In her professorships, where she gained prestige for her work, she instilled in her students the emancipation of women and their active participation in politics to change laws that, in those years, only belonged to men. With this, she became one of the leaders who started the path to achieve equality and democracy in the nation. Katie felt a mixture of pride, nostalgia, and also gratitude for having known this brilliant woman. Katie spent much of their time alone while her husband indulged in continuous vices. Over the years, after one of those horseback rides that kept him away from home for weeks at a time, Bob came down with the excesses of carousing and collapsed, ending his life before he reached the age of 50. Chapter 9. Tom in Sewell. Tom had just turned 20 when his mother was widowed. For that reason, and to help her, he set out to find work at the El Teniente copper mine. He got his first job in Sewell. Thanks to his skills and sympathy, he won the affection of his boss, Mr. Campbell, an American who was in charge of the mine camp staff. One afternoon, after work, he took Tom home to introduce him to his wife and daughter. The young woman, named Julia, had little distractions in that place. He was immediately taken into the confidence of the family who, every afternoon, invited him to tea with cakes and hot bread. They would then spend long hours playing poker as he completed the foursome. Thus grew a beautiful friendship between the young people, who took horseback rides through the snowy mountain range, sharing more and more moments until, as suspected, they fell in love. More her than him. Julia dreamed that when she returned to the United States, Tom would go with them. Meanwhile, in the offices of the Koya camp, a professional was being requested to fill the dentistry position for which Rosalinda was applying. She had studied at the University of Concepcion, in classrooms full of men who looked at her with suspicion. She had to overcome prejudice, further forging a tough and unyielding personality. Despite multiple problems at the beginning, she gradually gained respect and admiration, finishing her degree with honors. Now came the challenge of finding employment. However, after her first interview, she was hired to attend to the personnel of the entire mine. This was very unusual since in 1937, women did not assume such relevant positions and even less so, providing services mostly to men. Rosalinda was happy to be an employee of such status in the Braden Copper Co. Mr. Chammy, her boss and protector, granted her a small house in front of the soccer field. He showed her around the camp and its many services, including the little school. Its director, Leila Musar, was a traveled French woman with whom she made good friends. Mr. Chammy also allowed him the hospital where the dental clinic was located and introduced him to his future team. They toured the theater where was showing the latest CinemaScope releases. Then they went to the grocery store to meet its manager, an Italian man named Luigi, who was much loved because he would loan cigarettes, alcohol, and groceries from fortnight to fortnight until the day of the supper, as they called the cash advances. The grocery store was a social gathering place. People would congregate there to play cards, dice, or just chat over a beer. It was the ideal place to keep abreast of the latest news, as professionals and employees would arrive, and while shopping, would comment on the latest events and gossip. He also showed him the bowling hall, a game that was not very common in Chile, but which caused further amongst the gringos. And finally, they visited everyone's favorite place, the country club, in the middle of the spectacular golf course. This was a place where the weekend parties were held, with abundant food and lively dances that lasted until the wee hours of the morning. The female staff, such as some nurses and secretaries, waited Saturdays anxiously to attend with their best hairstyles and finery in search of a conquest. From time to time, Rosalinda would recall with much nostalgia those times lived to the fullest in the American style, where there was so much glamour and nothing was lacking. That morning, Tom woke up with a bad toothache, and upon arriving at work, asked his boss for a pass for the railroad down to Rancagua. "There is no need to go to the city," says Mr. Campbell. "We have a new doctor in Goya." So that afternoon, Tom went to the dental clinic and at the entrance was surprised to read a plaque that read, "Rosalinda Torrealba, dental surgeon." He opened the office door and listened. "Come in and sit down. I'll call the doctor now." He obeyed the secretary, who, after a moment, showed him the way to the surgeon's office. He became uneasy when he saw that Rosalinda was still writing her notes, and after a few seconds, without looking at him, she said, "Sit in the armchair." She, in her immaculate white apron, stood up casually, walked over and rearranged the headboard, ordering him, "Open your mouth." "This is the tooth that hurts me," he said, pointing to it. She ignored him and checked all the pieces. Finally, she commented to him, "It's not too bad. I'll do a cure and see you in 2 days." After the brief intervention, as he did not move, she indicated, "I'm done. You can go." Tom got up slowly and from the doorway watched her, then said goodbye and thanked her. When they reached the camp, Mr. Campbell asked him, "What about the doctor? Did she pull the tooth?" "No, she only cured it. I have to go back the day after tomorrow." The American smiled. The next day, Tom got up very early so as not to miss the railroad. He showered, shaved, put on aftershave, and picked out his favorite shirt, arriving punctually for the appointment. He knocked on the door and asked, "Good morning. May I come in?" The secretary acknowledged him with a smile. "Come in and sit down, please," she replied as she went to notify the doctor of the patient's arrival. He was shown in, and Rosalinda, again, without looking at him, ordered him to lie down on the couch. Then she approached him to put his head back and asked him, "Open your mouth." She did the healing in 5 minutes and told him, "You are ready to go." He stood up and asked, "I'll be back in 2 more days, doctor." "No," she said. "Come back next week." "All right," he said, leaving with a crestfallen look on his face. When the date came around, Tom was anxious to return and kept the appointment at exactly the right time. After the usual preliminaries in the waiting room, he was told to come in. She repeated her routine of sitting him on the couch and settling his head, then asked him, "How have you been?" "Well," he replied with a smile that was somewhere between flirtatious and seductive. "Not you. Your tooth," she said. "Did it hurt?" "Oh, no, nothing. It's perfect," he answered, serious and embarrassed. Rosalinda, for the last time, changed her healing. "It's ready." Tom looked at her and asked the usual question, "In 2 more days, doctor?" "No," she said, nonchalantly. "We're finished." He was unmoved by the response. He had grown accustomed to the routine of the softness of her hands as she settled his head or brushed his lips with her fingers as she worked on his mouth. "You may go," she said, when she saw that he was still sitting. "Oh, yes," he acclaimed, standing up and shaking her hand. Then he added, smiling his most seductive smile, "Thank you, doctor. I hope to see you again, and hopefully not for another toothache." On the way back to the camp, he stopped by the office to go over some pending work with Mr. Campbell. As evening fell, they made their way to their boss's house where Julia and her mother were waiting for them, to share tea. Then they played their usual poker games. Tom was already one of the family. They had grown fond of him because he always made them laugh with his tales of the mine. Sometimes he would tell them about his life in the north when he was a boy, and since he spoke perfect English, they understood each other wonderfully. When it was time to say goodbye, Julia gave him some of the magazines his father received monthly, such as Life, The Post, and others. Tom treasured them. In the evenings, in his bachelor bedroom, he enjoyed reading the articles and looking at the photographs. That night, he lay awake. He couldn't sleep, restless at the memory of the doctor in her spotless white apron. He got up early and headed to the office to organize the cruise, wrapping himself in the protective cloak of his duty. Julia sought him out in the afternoon, and he gallantly excused himself by telling her he was tired. Thus, with that excuse, he stayed away from the Campbell house for several days. The end of the year was approaching, and the staff was going on vacation. The Americans would take 2 months and go to the United States. Jula begged him to go with them to Chicago. "You will have a great future. My father will get you a good job. We'll get married and have children. We could also visit your relatives in San Francisco," she encouraged him. But all of her efforts to convince him were in vain. He did not love her. She was just his dear friend, with whom he shared beautiful moments. The Campbells went on the vacation to Chicago and never returned. But their memory still lingers, as it was captured not only in memory, but also in the photo albums that my father kept. It was through them that I met Jula. Chapter 10. Ralph's Arrival. Years passed and Emma's father worked hard. As he expanded his company, his success in the timber business increased. However, this required modernizing the sawmills to facilitate forest harvesting and meet market demands. Don Joaquin was a visionary and decided to invest in Caterpillar machinery, which he had brought to his corner of the world. When they arrived to the field, these yellow monsters amazed the owners and his workers, who tried to make them work, but it was impossible, since all these specifications and catalogs were in English and there was no one around who could understand them. After several unsuccessful attempts and efforts to have them produced, they ended up stored in warehouses. One morning, when Joaquin went to Temuco to buy the month's groceries and run some errands, he stayed as usual at the hotel of a French friend named Pierre. The latter, at the reception, greeted Joaquin with affection and gave him the key to room 202, which he had occupied for years. The guest entered, arranged his suitcase, and lay down on the bed to rest for a while before dinner time. At 8 o'clock, he went down to the first floor where the dining room was located, a room with a high-boarded ceiling, surrounded by large windows and the tables covered with indigo and white checkered tablecloths. On the walls hung paintings with landscapes of the French countryside, and in the background, a log was burning in a huge fireplace. Above it all was a tall gold leaf mirror. Joaquin settled in a corner from where he watched the diners coming and going. Suddenly, his gaze fell on a young man of gringo appearance, casually dressed, concentrated on the plans, papers, and maps that covered the table. Pierre approached his friend, sat down with him, and ordered the waiter a bottle of red wine with 2 glasses. They always ate together at dinner time to tell each other the latest news. Joaquin immediately asked him about the stranger. "Ah," said Pierre, "the gringo in the corner? He's an archaeologist who arrived a couple of days ago with an expedition to investigate the origin of the natives of Chiloé. He's just passing, though." "Does he speak Spanish?" asked Joaquin. "Yes, a little," Pierre replied. "He studied at the University of New Mexico and told me he traveled to the Yucatan to investigate the Mayan ruins. There he was able to practice some Spanish." "Invite him to the table," suggested Joaquin, who always had his mind on his business. "Maybe he can help me run the Caterpillar." Pierre approached the young man, talked to him, and after a while took him to the table. So it was that the gringo, after dining with the 2 men and learning about the problem of the machines, decided to embark on an adventure that would change the course of his life forever. The next day, as evening fell, Emma sat on the corridor bench looking out over the garden. It was the hour when her father usually returned from the city, and she was anxious to receive her orders. He would bring her newspapers, magazines, and some feminine embellishments such as gloves and stockings, as well as her favorite sweet treats. The men had set out on their journey, where they traveled long, muddy roads. The dialogue was terse. They only glanced at each other out of the corner of their eyes. From time to time, Ralph spotted a Mapuche family walking. He was struck by the indigenous clothing and ornaments, different from the Aztecs of Mexico. Joaquin tells him that there is a large community nearby. He has some natives working there who speak only Mapudungun, and they practice their ancestral customs such as hunting, fishing, and some agriculture. The gringo is happy to have the opportunity to meet these natives, as they will provide him with new materials for his studies. After traveling through kilometers of Araucaria forest, Joaquin continues. I immigrated here when I was 20 years old from La Rioja, Spain, looking for a better life. The government gave me a piece of land and I worked it very hard. I bought land, so all this, up to the slopes of the Llama volcano, is mine. Ralph listens with admiration. We arrive, says the Spaniard, pointing to the sign Hacienda Las Mercedes, resting on the large gate. The vehicle enters a path that leads to the entrance of the house. Emma runs out to greet her father, hugs him, and is surprised by his companion. Emita, this gentleman is Rolf Hutton. I met him at the hotel and he will be with us for a few days. He came to teach us how to assemble the caterpillar. Emma extends her hand to him, saying, Nice to meet you. He bows his head and replies, Good afternoon, miss. She smiles at his funny gringo accent. Everyone enters the house. The kitchen smells of firewood. The table waits for the guest. There is freshly baked bread, sopaipillas with cane syrup, jam, butter, and homemade fresh cheese. The maid serves them tea, while Emma takes care of the guest. Ralph says he was born in Mason City, Iowa, in the United States of America, and studied archaeology. In the summers, he worked handling heavy machinery, hence his knowledge and experience with this equipment. He adds that he has been traveling around some countries on archaeological expeditions for some time now. Emma listens, dazzled to the story, and comments, with some embarrassment, that she has only lived in the countryside. She knows the city of Temuco and once went to the capital to receive some relatives who came from Spain to manage her father's properties and barracks. Ralph listens to her attentively as he notices her fair complexion, golden hair, and blue eyes. He never thought there were such fair people in this place. His knowledge of the region was limited to what he had studied of the indigenous population. I remember we stayed at the Krylon Hotel in Santiago, Emma continues. I love to go for a walk through the passages and go into the Gath and Shape store. My father bought me beautiful dresses and many other things that do not arrive to Temuco. We also went to the Municipal Theater to see the Blue Danube Ballet. That night we had dinner at the hotel with some gentlemen to whom my father sold wood. Ralph replies, I have not been to Santiago yet. When I return to the United States, I will stay there for a few days. It is time to rest, and everyone retires to their rooms. The next morning, the two men get up very early, drink coffee, and go to the warehouse. When the employees see the gringo, we're surprised and wait with great curiosity for Don Joaquin's order. We'll finally open these drawers, damn. I found this gringo in good time, says Joaquin, so he'll give us a hand to start up these damn machines. Good one, boss, answered one of the tenants. Now we are going to cut down the hill. Thus begins this odyssey. After a week of hard work, Ralph finally climbs into the first machine they assemble and hits the ignition. The yellow monster roars loudly and everyone applauds as he appears at the threshold of the warehouse gate. The men squeal with pride in having collaborated in his feature. That night, at dinner time, they toasted with good wine. Joaquin, euphoric, drank a couple of glasses more than usual and celebrated with his guest, who drank along with his host. They laughed as they recounted anecdotes of the previous days that at the time did not seem so optimistic. Thus was born a great friendship between the two men. Meanwhile, Emma watched them closely and thought about how happy her father looked sharing with the handsome Ralph. After midnight, Joaquin retires to his room to dream all of the work his wonderful machines would produce, leaving the young man alone. Emma and Ralph come out for air, and sit down on the bench in the garden to gaze at the stars as they had done before. He takes her hand and tells her that he's glad to have met her father and accepted the job proposal. Emma asks him, "You just like the job?" "Oh, honey, you are the best thing about this job for me." "How much longer will you stay?" "Not that long, because I have to continue with the archaeology research on the continent." She looks at him sadly. She wishes he would stay because since he came to the country, her life had a new meaning. She thinks she has fallen in love with his American. He surprises her with a tender kiss on the cheek and says goodnight. Time passed quickly, and it was time for Ralph to leave. Joaquin has become aware of the budding romance between his daughter and the foreigner, seeing the relationship as a good opportunity, both for Emma and for his business. On the one hand, Emma is very lonely and does not have the opportunity to meet young suitors due to the remoteness of her properties. For him, Ralph would be her right-hand man in business, helping her to expand her wealth. Ultimately, his daughter would have to marry and carry on his legacy. So it was that one morning, while they were having breakfast, Joaquin offered Ralph a job at Las Mercedes. The American had no more excuse to leave, and the love he felt for Emma justified this change of plans. The youngsters continued to fall in love and before long made plans for marriage, just as Joaquin had envisioned. On a warm autumn evening, Ralph thrills Emma by showing her an engagement ring. As the three of them dine, he asks Joaquin for her hand. Joaquin agrees on the condition that they stay and live in the country. In a couple of weeks, the father organized the wedding to be held in Temuco, in Pierre's hotel. The days and weeks go by as the machines enter the forest dragging the felled logs to the sawmills. Joaquin, contemplating the task, feels proud and pats the back of his friend and future son-in-law. Once the date for the wedding is set, Emma asks Michelle, Pierre's wife, to accompany her to Santiago to pick up the bridal trousseau and everything she needs for her honeymoon. Back in Temuco, Michelle takes care of all the details of the wedding, which will be in a couple of weeks. She's in charge of arranging the hall with flowers, ordering the food, and arranging everything for the party. It was a small ceremony, to which the bride's father had invited some neighbors, Spanish compatriots with whom from time to time he met at the Temuco club to play brisca. He also invited the banker and one or another politician from the era. Emma, nervous, has been staying at the hotel with Michelle since the previous week. She was his godmother and helped her dress for the wedding day. She put together her bridal bouquet with flowers she cut from her own garden. Michelle looked at Emma and hugged her as she had been his daughter. Joaquin entered the room and was thrilled to see her so beautiful and radiant. "My child, how time has passed! You're already a woman. It makes me happy to know that you will stay at home where there is room for many grandchildren." He took her by the arm and led her to the hall to give her to her fiancé. The priest blessed the rings, offered the Holy Sacrament, and wished them a long and happy life together. The civil registry officer registered the marriage according to the law. "I love you, honey," Ralph whispers to her at the end of the ceremony. Afterwards, the guests, together with the bride and groom, pass into the dining room decorated with arrangements of camellias and white roses. Silver chandeliers illuminate the dining room from an elegant walnut and ebony buffet. Art Deco-style glass and chrome wall sconces match the 6 white bulb chandelier hanging from the center of the room. Joaquin makes a toast for his daughter and son-in-law, thanking his friends for sharing this special moment. Emma and her father dance the traditional waltz. "Dad, I wish my mother had accompanied us on this day. She will always be with you." The newlyweds set out on their honeymoon trip to the Antumalal Hotel on the shores of Lake Villarrica. It had recently opened and was in vogue. Ralph pulls back the curtains in the room as they take in the lush scenery. Lake Villarrica calm as a mirror, and the volcano still preserving the winter snow thrills them. Emma is nervous. She enters the bathroom, looks at herself in the mirror, and smiles. She moistens her face and hands and perfumes her body with a jasmine-scented cream. She's dressed in a soft white satin, a lace nightgown through which her pink nipples are translucent. Ralph can't wait and gently knocks on the bathroom door. "Are you okay, honey?" "Yes, I'll go out immediately," Emma answers. When she finally comes out, he is dazzled to see her so attractive. Her hair is loose and cascades over her shoulders. Ralph walks over and takes her in his arms and carries her to the marriage bed. He knows that Emma is nervous and begins to kiss her gently, so that she gradually gives herself to him. Their passion grows minute by minute, until it culminates in an unbridled mutual surrender. The next few days, they drive around making plans for the future. He promises to take her to the United States to meet his parents. Emma is happy, hugs him, and promises to love him forever.